a lot of times people assume that it's just about sex, that that's the betrayal. And of course, that is a huge part of it, but it's so much deeper than that. What is something that you think you want people to know just in terms of what the deeper meaning behind that betrayal?
Well, from the betrayed partner's perspective, it always feels like you are the problem. It feels like this must mean something about you. And of course, that is virtually never the case. It's not about you. It wasn't even done to you, which I know sounds really hard to hear, but it was done for them. There's something missing either within the relationship or within the individual who betrayed. And they may not be even aware of it. We come into relationships carrying all manner of experiences and wounds, and maybe even in some cases traumas that we're not aware of, at least not in the way that we may come to be aware of later on in life. And then that can be almost like the lens for which we approach this relationship. So it's not surprising that sometimes when something doesn't feel fulfilled by a partner and there's a shining bright light over there, then all of a sudden that is quite appealing.
Welcome to Life and Love by Design. I'm your host, Odette Coronel, an accredited professional coach, relationship mentor, NLP practitioner, and coach supervisor. I have guided countless individuals and couples who feel stuck to step out of autopilot and create relationships and lives that feel intentional, joyful, and deeply fulfilling. Tune in every Wednesday where I'll share tools, conversations, practical strategies, and fresh perspectives so you can get more intentional about designing a life and relationship that truly fulfills you. So let's dive in.
Welcome back to Life and Love by Design. I'm your host, Odette Coronel, and today I'm joined by Luke Shillings. Luke is a relationship and infidelity recovery coach and host of the After the Affair podcast. Drawing from personal experience and years of coaching individuals and couples, Luke helps people move from emotional chaos to clarity after betrayal. His work blends compassion with practicality, helping clients rebuild trust, identity, and authentic connection, whether they stay or they leave. So welcome, Luke. I'm so happy to have you on today, and I'm really excited about this conversation and see where it goes. But before we get into the deep stuff, I want to start off with something light and something fun. So tell me, what's something recently that has made you smile or even laugh?
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm sure you have it in the US as well, the TV series Traitors. And it's on. I don't really have it. I'm sure it's like I'm sure it is dotted around the world. But anyway, it's pretty big in the UK, and they're running a celebrity version of it at the moment. The finals this coming week, and me and my partner have been like absolutely like consuming every possible component of it. And I think there's a kind of a twisted irony, given that obviously what I do is help the betrayed partner overcome betrayal. And, we could argue that I have a specific insight into deception that maybe lots of other people don't get to see. So the idea of the TV show The Traitors, which is really about the faithful versus the traitors, literally, in this case, it makes it for a really exciting post-episode analysis, which me and my partner enjoy very, very much.
I don't know. I mean, we must have it here, so I'm going to have to look it up. We'll talk afterwards. You can tell me what network I can find it, and sounds interesting. So, but speaking about that, tell me how it is that you became to specialize in helping people heal after infidelity. Tell me a little bit about your story.
Sure. Yeah. I think with a lot of, or what I've come to learn is a lot of people who I've come across over recent years, be that coaches or other professionals in their field of passion, it's common to be driven by something that happened to themselves. And of course, that's no different for me. I experienced betrayal in my own marriage, my own relationship. It was something that I really had not expected. I genuinely believed I was very happily married. Perfect? No, but certainly nothing to have worried about, at least from what I was concerned. It turns out that my wife that was not the place that she was at, and ultimately an affair led to our separation and divorce. And that, in many ways, although unbeknownst to me at the time, became a catalyst, an opportunity to do something really different with a very difficult situation. I decided that I didn't want this specific experience of my life to define me, and therefore wanted to turn it into something where not only I was helping myself, but also being able to help others too. And that's exactly what I've done. I've spent the last 5 or 6 years doing exactly that and helping hundreds, if not thousands of people in the process. And it's been very, very rewarding. I love every minute of it.
Yeah. That's amazing. What you went through this experience, which I'm sure was not easy, was very challenging to deal with. And you took that experience and decided, I'm going to help other people. I'm going to take everything that I've learned and I'm going to use it to help others. And I think that that's amazing. And I think that adds to your own authenticity because you've been there.
Yeah. If I'm honest, it was never about healing me, as in that was not the purpose for my journey into this in some sense. But in many ways, of course, it does constantly pour good quality self-love into myself to really help me through everything that I've experienced. And I think being an example of what's possible for people who have been betrayed is something that I will always endeavor to do.
Yeah, I love that, being an example of what is possible. And tell me a little bit about what you mean by that.
Well, I think when we've experienced any difficult challenge in our life, particularly when we felt hard done by in some way, so particularly when it comes to betrayal, it's some other person, some external circumstance that's outside of our control has created a situation for us that we really are not comfortable with, and can be incredibly painful, incredibly disorienting. And I think the default is to want to run away from that discomfort and hide from it. And we bury ourselves in shame and guilt and asking relentless questions of how we didn't see it coming and why we didn't notice what was going on right in front of our eyes. And then we beat ourselves up relentlessly as a consequence of that, which can really keep us stuck. And we can start to wear this identity of I am a betrayed spouse. And maybe we can even add on the layer of I am a victim. And yeah, okay, technically we are a victim of circumstance, but that's not an identity that we're going to want to embody moving forward. So when I think about what being an example of what possible is to somebody who has been betrayed, it's being able to take a very difficult situation and use it for something, not only just to get you back to, in some sense, where you were, but actually to create something that you didn't realize was possible for you. And of course, I've changed my life completely since that experience. And I could honestly say that it's probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, despite the enormous amount of pain and discomfort that I had to go through in the short term to then get to this thing. But by really sticking with that and not giving up, it has proved, well, very valuable. And obviously it acts as an example of what could be possible for somebody else, even if they took a very different path to me.
Yeah, that's an incredible journey. And you're not just an example of what is possible, but you're an example of what I like to call living by design, loving by design. You decided what you wanted to do with this experience that was so difficult that happened to you. And you designed something. You didn't want to stay in as a victim, even though you were a victim of something that happened. You decided to take that and change your life. And your life is completely different today than it was, prior to the betrayal. And you've literally designed your life based on what was, based on what was, accepting what was, and you decided what to make of it.
Exactly. And it's very easy to be angry and resistant at the world around us, whether that be our partner's behaviors, whether that be your boss, whether that be politics, whether it be whatever it is. It's very easy to get angry and frustrated at the things that are usually outside of our direct control, and almost hold them directly responsible for our own discomfort. And okay, fine, there may have been the stimulus that sort of set that emotional experience in motion, but they are not the ones in control of it. You are. And I think just knowing that you've got some autonomy in your own emotional experience is so important. And it's funny, you talk about intention. When I first started coaching, my coaching program was called On Purpose Coaching. And for that exact reason, it's because we're doing things on purpose. This is not by accident. This is about focusing. It's about setting a plan. It's about moving forward one step at a time and building all of those steps to help us feel safe and secure, and like there's a foundation in place to build something new from.
Yeah, absolutely. I also work with couples, and I don't specialize in infidelity, but I have, worked with couples that have faced infidelity. And a lot of times people assume that it's just about sex, that's the betrayal. And of course, that is a huge part of it, but it's so much deeper than that. What is something that you think you want people to know, just in terms of what the deeper meaning behind that betrayal?
Well, I suppose there's two things to consider. One is from the betrayed partner's perspective, it always feels like you are the problem. It feels like this must mean something about you. And of course, that is virtually never the case. It's not about you. It wasn't even done to you, which I know sounds really hard to hear, but it was done for them. There's something missing either within the relationship or within the individual who betrayed. And they may not be even aware of it. We come into relationships carrying all manner of experiences and wounds, and maybe even in some cases traumas that we're not aware of, at least not in the way that we may come to be aware of later on in life. And then that can be almost like the lens for which we approach this relationship. So it's not surprising that sometimes when something doesn't feel fulfilled by a partner, and there's a shining bright light over there, then all of a sudden that is quite appealing. So I think you're right. And on the one hand, the sex plays a component, but actually I would say it's a pretty small component, very, very small in the overall grand scheme of things. It's always about connection or fulfilling some need that has been unmet in some way. And it's not that the betrayed partner hasn't met the needs of their partner. It's that the unfaithful partner has not even known really what their needs are, or how to communicate them, or how to do anything about it when they're feeling lacking in some sense. So communication and connection are really at the peak of the issue, I suppose, for most people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, of course, both parties have a role in whatever that disconnection is,
Sure.
but the act of the betrayal is, I would agree with that, is usually about the person doing the betrayal. There's some need that's not fulfilled, or there's some trauma that's been triggered or has surfaced, and they're trying to fill that void somehow.
Of course, yeah. I mean, both partners are definitely responsible for how they show up in their relationship. That's always true, irrespective of whether betrayal has occurred or not. But the actions of one person are not the responsibility of the other. And I think that's where we can sometimes get lost. And often there can be a delay in understanding there. If we think about the unfaithful partner, well, they've already been going through this emotional experience. They've formed this connection with another person, whatever that's looked like. And in some cases, that's been going on for days, weeks, months, in some cases, even years or even decades. They can be very lengthy in some cases. So they're in a very different place to the betrayed partner when they discover it. It's almost like we're playing the same game, but with different rules. And it makes it really hard to bridge that connection, because when two people thought they were perfectly aligned, the betrayal comes along, which completely derails the betrayed spouse. And now all of a sudden they're miles and miles and miles apart, and trying to rebuild that connection is not easy, but it's definitely achievable if both partners are willing to take responsibility for their part in the rebuilding process.
Yeah. And sometimes not many times, the person that was betrayed feels, why am I not enough? What did I do wrong? What do they have? What does the other person have that I don't have? And it's just deeper than that. So it's always deeper than that. And there's also emotional betrayal. There are instances where it doesn't become physical or it hasn't been physical yet, but that emotional, we've heard of emotional affairs in the workplace or things like that, they can be quite painful
Oh,
for the
yeah,
partner
absolutely.
that's being betrayed.
I mean, ultimately, when we think about, it's interesting. We think even just the word infidelity, like what does it really mean? And actually, it's different things to different people. The betrayal is ultimately the betrayal of trust. If we think of trust as being one person's belief that somebody would act in the way that we'd anticipated, and then they fail to act in that way, then that trust has been broken in some sense. And that's really where the betrayal stems from.
That's
And
what
that
it
can
is.
be
It's trust.
many, many different things. Yeah, everything from, you're right, just a one-off situation that occurred on a business trip to, a 10-year really in-depth affair and everything in between.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's about trust. The word infidelity, fidelity is all wrapped
Of course.
around trust. So when that trust is broken, it's so difficult to rebuild. But it's possible, but it's so much work to
Yeah.
rebuild that trust.
Yes. It can be quite the journey, but one worth taking, irrespective of what the outcome of the relationship ultimately is.
Yeah. So I know that you coach people that have been betrayed, and you also coach people that have betrayed their partners. What is that experience like? Because I know, of course, as coaches, we have to manage our own state, and we're not here to judge. We remain unbiased, and yet, especially as someone who has experienced the other side of the coin and been betrayed, I can see how that could be a little bit challenging.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're not the first person to make that comment or observation. And yeah, I can't actually remember it ever feeling uncomfortable in a particular. Certainly not
Really?
from not from a personal perspective. I think in part because when I went through my own experience, one of the things that I really focused on to help me heal, it's just one component, it's by no means the whole thing, was really trying to understand the perspective of the unfaithful spouse.
Yeah.
And in my situation, it was somebody I knew. Not that I had conversations with that person afterwards, but I was able to, at least from, I suppose, an empathy perspective, to try and understand what was maybe going on in their world and what that looked like, and what their motivations were, but really doing it from a place of as minimal judgment as I could, which of course was hard because there are lots of emotions tied up. And maybe I do have a natural advantage that I'm able to maybe compartmentalize certain components, not to not deal with them, but just so that I can almost say, okay, right, we're objectively looking at this specific set of information, this data. What am I making it mean? And is that the only option? Could something else be true? And the more I looked into that, I realized that it was far less about me, which is what I thought originally. I always thought, like, well, they must be better than me, or, my wife must think that they're better than me, or some combination of those things. And I realized that it wasn't about that. That's just not what it was about. So actually, as the time's gone by, one of the reasons at least, that I've really quite enjoyed working with those who have been unfaithful but want to make some changes in their life is both in terms of getting a continually deeper understanding of what their experience is, which I can then share and learn from, and also help the betrayed spouses. But also I think it helps put infidelity, although again uncomfortable as it might be for some people to accept, as a neutral circumstance in the world. And it's not until we as individuals apply meaning to it does it become a problem. And that's okay. Like, I'm not saying it shouldn't be a problem for you. It definitely should be a problem for you based on everything that we base our relationships on and trust, but it doesn't have all of the power. And it's not something that you probably want to identify as, or to continue to identify with for the rest of your life. So really understanding has a huge benefit moving forward. It doesn't mean you have to like what the other person did. It doesn't mean you have to, justify it in any way. It doesn't mean you have to just forget it and get over it. None of that.
And I imagine that getting to that place takes time.
Of
It's
course.
okay to be angry. It's okay to be, to feel all of your feelings. You're entitled to feel everything that you feel, but it's a matter of not staying there. It's about getting to the other side and really understanding why, what was going on for my partner, what was going on for the person that did the betraying. But I'm sure that was quite a journey to get from,
Yeah, oh, for sure. And I
it
think
initially happened to then getting to the place of just really finding it neutral and getting to, let me see what's really underneath.
I think understanding your own pace is important.
Yeah.
So if our nervous systems are dysregulated as a consequence of something like this, which of course they often are, this is a pretty extreme discovery that you may have experienced, particularly if this is something you've experienced recently. It's a real shock to your nervous system, and trying to understand how to keep yourself safe, but not to the point where you build up walls so tall that you not only can other people not get in, but you can't get out. That can keep you stuck in that location for too long. On the flip side, trying to, logically and just kind of, I suppose intellectualize the process too quickly would be disruptive for your nervous system, and your nervous system isn't ready to catch up. So you can make logical sense of everything that's gone on, and you can say, okay, well, I can look at this from a neutral perspective, and I can understand this and this and this and this, but your body's not ready. So understanding your pace between both logic and emotion is hugely important. And of course, it's not the same for everybody.
Are you feeling stuck, afraid of change, or just questioning the way you're living? Many of my clients come to me feeling disconnected, unfulfilled, or simply uncertain about what's next. Whether it's a relationship that's lost its spark, or a purpose that's faded, or patterns that keep repeating. As a professional accredited coach, relationship mentor, and coach supervisor, I support individuals and couples in reconnecting with themselves and each other. Take the first step and book an introductory consultation with me, and together we'll begin designing a life and a relationship that feels authentic, intentional, and entirely your own.
Yeah, and you want to make sure that you do continue to protect yourself. There are people that become serial betrayers. We don't really address what it is that's going on. It can happen again. It can become a pattern.
Of course.
So it's also a matter of, okay, let's really understand what happened so that we can learn from it and not let it happen again.
Yeah, and the things that I see which can sometimes be concerning, particularly for the betrayed spouse, is they become detectives. And then everything is about just trying to find the next piece of information. Right. It's just a continual barrage of questions. And of course, with
that lack of trust, right? So then they want to know everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes perfect sense. I mean, human beings, we are pretty much hardwired to seek certainty. So when we feel uncertain, we do something to try and rebalance the scales in some way. But the problem is when we get answers to the questions that we ask, it usually then creates two more questions, and that just continues on and on and on and on. So that there is a balance between knowing enough so that you can feel safe to move forward and not overwhelming yourself with too much information. Because I've definitely worked with plenty of people who asked a lot of information, very specific details. It was shared, and that's quite hard to sometimes take away.
Yeah, sometimes it's not useful to just know every single detail.
Definitely not.
It's not helpful. Is it so? When do you know when forgiveness is possible and when it's just time to end things?
Well, I think forgiveness is available irrespective of whether you stay or leave, first of all, because forgiveness is ultimately for you. It's not for the other person. Yeah. Forgiveness is, if we think about what lack of forgiveness is, well, lack of forgiveness is like carrying a heavy weight on your shoulders. It's like dragging it everywhere you go. It slows you down. It's uncomfortable. You can't move freely in some sense. And it's under the illusion that if we were to put it down, that the other person is sort of off the hook.
Like right, that you're condoning what they did.
Yeah, exactly. And of course that's not what we're doing at all. That's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is about releasing that burden on you.
Yeah. I think Oprah said forgiveness is about letting go of the wish that the past would have been different.
Yeah.
Kind of accepting what was. You're not condoning it. You're just accepting that that's what happened. That's what it was.
Exactly.
And and you're right. It's for yourself. It's a gift that you give yourself. So you let go of that burden that you're carrying.
You don't have to tell the other person that you've forgiven them. In fact, I would arguably, if I was going to choose, probably recommend not to.
Yeah.
Like it's not needed, because then there's an agenda behind it. Because what are you hoping from that specifically? You're making it about them, just by communicating that. And of course, for the unfaithful spouse who's feeling guilt and potentially shame, they're probably seeking that word. And if they hear that word, it's as though, oh, okay, now we can carry on as normal.
Yeah, all is forgiven.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, obviously, like every situation is complicated to some extent, but the patterns are pretty consistent throughout, irrespective of the individual details.
Right, yeah. So that makes sense. Forgiveness is something that you want to come to no matter what, because it's part of your own healing.
100%.
Yeah. So how do you, I think, in your case, you decided to rebuild the relationship. You were able to rebuild trust, and it wasn't easy, but you are, again, an example of that possibility as well. It doesn't necessarily have to mean the end of the relationship. It could be a new beginning in the relationship. And sometimes the challenges that we face, if it doesn't break you, it tests you and it makes you stronger. But what does that path to rebuilding trust, rebuilding that commitment, what does that look like?
Well, I suppose, I mean, again, just for the sake of clarity for the listeners, briefly, me and my wife, initially I'd wanted to rebuild the relationship or to try and stay in the relationship and save it. But and I had some boundaries that I put in place, and ultimately she wasn't able to come to that place. So we separated and divorced, and she remained in a relationship with the affair partner for a little while. We actively co-parented and really focused on what that looked like, because it was really important to both of us. And, she definitely pulled her weight in there as well. I can't take all the credit for that. And then a few years later, we were both in a place where things were different. Their relationship had come to an end. We'd both been single for a while. We'd, done dating and various bits, and decided to see what reconnection might look like for us. And that's ultimately what we ended up doing. And sort of fast forward another 2 or 3 years, and that brings us to where we are now. And so a couple of things. One is, on the one hand, and it sounds a bit cliche, that first part or first phase of the relationship was over. It was done, and this was not about trying to rebuild what was. If anything, that would have been the last thing we wanted to do, because
right. You don't want to go back to what
exactly
wasn't working.
Exactly, what was led to what happened. So at least it contributed in some sense.
Right.
So going back to that place didn't make sense. So maybe it was about a clarity and an awareness of what could be and what that might look like. And that started really just by being much more open and transparent with our communication. And both of us, we both played a huge part in this, and checking in more regularly, really understanding what was aligned, what were the things that we liked and what we didn't like. And of course, sometimes when you've had that, the bombshell of betrayal occur, what is often the case for many partners is all of a sudden there's an openness that exists that wasn't there whilst the relationship was there. It's almost like the weight and the pressure of the relationship is removed temporarily so that you can be very open and just say really what you're thinking. It's
almost like the worst thing that can happen happened.
Exactly.
So here we are, and let's go. We can be open. We can be vulnerable.
Completely.
We've been through it all.
And the people-pleasing hat gets taken off, and we just show up authentically as we are.
Be honest,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you might be surprised what you discover about each other. Because I think one of the challenges that many people get into is they make an assessment of their partner very early on in the relationship, and then it kind of stays as this loose sort of static perspective of that's who my partner is. I know them. And, so regularly that I think of people who've been together for a long time have this perception that they know their partner better than anybody, and they know them better than they know themselves. But what I've come to learn over the years is actually what we're really good at is predicting behavior, but we're not necessarily so good at predicting the motivation behind that behavior. So we might have seen our partners show up in a fairly consistent way for many, many years, and we believe because we knew what that meant in the early days, it still means the same thing now. But that motivation may have changed. It may have changed to obligation. It may have even shifted towards resentment. And this can have a real detrimental effect on a relationship as it goes forward. And that's because those regular check-ins weren't occurring. And often because life gets in the way.
We're
you have
busy with
kids. Yeah,
and
all the things, exactly.
and work and
Yeah.
that's where communication is so important, because you're not the same person that you were when you first met or when you first got married. I've been married over 26 years, almost 27 years. And the person I am today is not who I was
Exactly
25 years ago,
no.
And it wasn't who I was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. We're constantly growing and changing and evolving, and that's what's supposed to happen. But if we don't keep communicating with our partners, if we don't keep checking in, then you don't know who I am today. You know who I was, but you don't necessarily know who I am today. So
exactly.
that is so important, to continue to check in and have that time together.
Yeah. And I think it's why often you can get to a certain point in your relationship and let's say something like betrayal occurs. And it's not only betrayal, but it's a significant life event. And you look at your partner and it's just like you don't know who they are.
Yeah, like they're a stranger.
Yeah. And it's because you've not been looking at them. You've been looking at other things, your career, the kids, whatever it is. And it's like, that's fine because that's what society says. We're doing the right thing. We're showing up. We're being all of the things. But a relationship isn't just a decision you make and then forget about it. Even the vows that you make if you get married, they're not just something that you say and then just forget about. Oh, well, that's it. It's done and dusted now. I don't need to worry about that for the rest of my life. No, it's a continual choice. You wake up every day, you choose to love your partner. You wake up every day, you choose to, honor the things. You choose over and over and over and over and over again, every single day. And I sometimes say that to people and they're like, oh, that sounds exhausting. It's like, but I don't really understand how or why you would not want to choose your partner. Like why, or more importantly, why would you continue to do the same thing if you didn't choose it? Like, what are you doing?
Right. What's the point then? If you're not choosing,
what's the point?
If you're not committed, then what is the point?
Exactly. And I think we can just slip off that path quite easily if we're not careful.
Yeah. Because then it leads to, you could just make assumptions about each other, and there's no point in making assumptions. We need to be able to express what we need, and also we need to be able to be in tune with what our partner needs and make sure that we're listening and we're seeing our partner as they are. Yeah.
Agreed.
It's funny because people say that relationships are so hard and marriage is hard, and not that it's not hard. Of course it's hard. Anything that is important to us is hard, just like having children, work is hard. But I don't know where I heard it, but they said when it's something that stresses you out or that you are dreading when you think about it, that's hard work. That's stressful. But when it's something that you're passionate about and is meaningful to you, yes, it's a lot of work, but it's something that you do because you're passionate about it and you really care. So it's almost like work that we want to do, that we can't imagine not doing.
Exactly. It's like, I can't imagine not doing what I do now. And of course, there are components of what I do that are challenging. There's components of being a father that are challenging.
That's life.
Yes, of course it is.
Anything worth it is.
Yeah, and I can be, frustrated and angry at that, or I can choose it and do it anyway.
Exactly.
Because it's who I want to be. Yeah, I'm not kidding myself. There's no illusion there. And I believe that anybody else should kid themselves too. Even if it's a shock, even if now, today, as you're going through whatever it is you're going through right now, whether even it's just listening to this conversation, and all of a sudden it's like the curtains come down and you're seeing yourself, or you're seeing your life, or seeing your relationship through a different perspective, it can be terrifying. And the safest and easiest thing to do is to get back under the covers and not go anywhere and just keep going for another 5 years. But ask your future self, like, what are they going to think about you looking back in a few years' time? Are they going to be proud of you? Or are they going to be thinking, really? That was what you thought was the best thing to do that time? Doesn't make it easy, but nothing worthwhile's easy.
It's almost like when you accept that life is not supposed to be easy, it's not meant to be easy, then things become easy in my mind, because
agreed.
It's just, this is what it is.
I teach a concept called 50-50 for that reason.
Right.
Often you ask the question like, well, what should be the balance of positive to negative emotion or wanted to unwanted emotion. And everyone's like, oh, it should be 90% positive and 10% negative, or 80% positive. And it's like, well, happiness doesn't exist without sadness. Like, it's all on a spectrum, and they're all there and they're all available. And it's not that you have to feel angry, or you have to feel sad, or you have to feel betrayed. You get to, you choose to. They're available to you, and they're all physical.
Sometimes it's completely appropriate to feel that way.
Absolutely.
It's appropriate to feel, happy 100% of the time.
No, completely. And it is about that, being willing to, almost desiring to feel, there are lots of emotions. I mean, anxiety is a close friend of mine. And, I recognize it it can be pretty helpful sometimes, but it also gets a bit carried away from time to time.
Right. With anxiety, I like to tell my clients, it's trying to tell you a message. What is the message that it's sending you? It's okay to be aware of it, notice it, feel it. Once you feel it and you've got the message, then you can move on from it. Take the message from it and move on from it. But it could be very useful and helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Anxiety just wants you to put in as many possible backup plans to cover every possible eventuality. Yeah, just in case. And of course, none of those things ever come to fruition.
No. Right.
So funny.
Yeah. Okay. This is great. So I want to ask you, the show's called Life and Love by Design. So how do you define or design life and love when you're talking about someone that has experienced betrayal?
Don't be afraid of the discomfort. Don't be afraid of it. Like you just said, it is there to teach you. Anxiety is there to teach you, and as is every other emotion that you experience. They're all notifications. They're all little signals, little messages. They don't get to dictate the show, but they are there as information which you get to use to help you move forward. The more we hide away or try to run away from those feelings, the harder it is to get to a place where we feel safe and loved and loving and happy and content and peaceful, and all of the emotions that most people would probably list when you said, how do you want to feel? And, often I think happiness, or at least the people who want to be happy, are usually unhappy because they believe that they should be happy. Where if you release the pressure that you're putting yourself on that expectation and acknowledge that actually being sad and angry and hurt and upset and frightened and all of the other things, that is part of what it means to be human. Yeah, and accepting that is actually, well, that's how you love yourself. And that's where it starts.
Oh, I love that. Embracing the discomfort and being okay with it.
Yep.
That's what makes you human.
100%. I mean, the world's going to continually throw things at you. So you can sit there in your little, castle, your little fortress with your big walls up, getting angry at everything going on. But then you just remain disconnected and alone and isolated. And that's not fun.
Yeah. I love it. This has been amazing. One last question, just for fun. What is a book or some kind of quote that really is meaningful for you?
Everything becomes clear after it's happened. I think we get stuck in a place of seeking clarity before it's safe to move forward. But clarity is not possible until you're on the other side. So taking action is always going to move you forward. And then things become
And then
clear.
the clarity comes.
And then the clarity comes. Yeah.
I love that. What do you tell the listeners where they can find you, how they can connect with you?
Yeah, so I think, as you mentioned at the top, I'm a podcast host myself. The After the Affair podcast, you can find it on all of the major podcast platforms. Or you can visit my Instagram page at My Life Coach Luke.
Excellent. Well, Luke, thank you so much for being on. I hope that you'll come back again and we'll have another amazing conversation. And for everyone else, until next time, remember that your life and your love are yours to design.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Life and Love by Design with me, your host, Odette Coronel. If anything that you heard today resonated with you, please take a moment to like and share this episode, subscribe, even leave a rating. This helps us grow and reach more amazing people just like you who are ready to evolve and design a life and a love that they want to live. And don't forget to join the conversation on Instagram at Odette Coronel Coaching. I would love to hear your takeaways. And if you don't have Instagram, you can always email me at lifecoach@odettecoronel.com. Until next time, remember your life and your love are yours to design. See you next week.